Today is Friday, July 16th, and this morning I enjoyed the opportunity to chat with a couple of men who are involved in the Anglican ordinariate within the church, who are working to restore not only the beauty of English language worship in Catholic circles, but are also incorporating a fuller vision of classical Catholic education and community life in that work as well. It's very refreshing to talk with men who are concerned with a fuller renewal of Catholic culture or improvement of Catholic culture than we find in typical conversations with Latin Mass folks who usually are obsessed about liturgical issues and neglect other areas almost completely. But the questions asked were related to the formation of either classical Catholic schools or classical Catholic co-ops for homeschool families, some sort of hybrid arrangement. And in today's talk, I'd like to give my advice for how such an arrangement might be made and some of the practical obstacles that need to be overcome, where the Classical Liberal Arts Academy would serve as the provider of the actual curriculum materials and also some of the support as far as the details of the curriculum are concerned, possibly even teacher development, articulation of the curriculum goals and things like that to parents so that the school can build. And the schools or hybrid homeschool programs wouldn't be limited by adults with expertise in the classical liberal arts, which are going to be always rare, if they can be found at all. So the first concern anyone needs to give attention to who's interested in a project like this is that this work is far more difficult than I think anyone can understand. There are so many obstacles, and it really requires a person who has a mission-oriented vision and willingness to commit to a long-term project with great patience. It has to be a self-motivated, hard-working, humble, persevering individual or group of individuals to undertake this kind of work, because it's not going to happen quickly, it's not going to be easy, and there's no shallow temporal reward to be gained for this kind of work. No one is going to write big checks for this kind of stuff. Parents are always going to be skeptical. And the biggest obstacle is going to be trust, gaining the trust of parents, allowing time for the fruits of these studies to begin to be perceivable, and then to have some success, getting a few kids through the program and out into the kinds of vocations or universities that parents are interested in seeing their children get into. It's just going to take a lot of time to build trust, gain the support of a community, and that time through which that trust and success is going to be gained is going to be a very difficult time for the people involved. Now, what the CLAA offers anyone who's interested in this work is this. We can provide all of the curriculum materials, and we can provide the specialized expertise and support that these schools or programs are going to need to rely on. Let me say this. We give people the opportunity to start these schools and programs who don't have our expertise. We don't require that they bring this expertise to their own school or group. They can focus on the work that's within their competency and experience, and they can lean on us for the real nerdy expertise in classical liberal arts education, in curriculum, publishing, and that sort of thing. And they can focus more on the work of actually organizing a school, building culture on the ground, and simply supervising and helping the students, which is extremely important. It's helpful to compare it with lawmaking and law enforcement. If we think about it, Aristotle explains this in the beginning of his Rhetoric. To create an excellent system of law in a nation, the actual work of composing the laws could be done by one person, one wise person. The work of enforcing the law requires an army of workers, a large number of persons. And those persons who enforce the law, they don't need to have the wisdom of the lawmaker. Because once the law is written, that work is finished. Aristotle argues that states should have detailed laws because that allows a small number of wise men to effect the largest amount of good, and it takes away from the opportunity for local judges or local police or local courts to screw things up. The job of a police officer, for example, is just to enforce the law. He's not a judge. He goes out and he has specific procedures to follow, and he's not the interpreter of those procedures. He's not the judge of the actions of different people. He is there simply to protect the common good and arrange so that people who are suspected of crimes have a trial before a judge so that the law can be applied carefully to all different circumstances, the details of which a police officer rarely has access to. And the judge's job is not to be a police officer. The judge is not responsible to go and stop crimes in progress or break up hostile situations or bring anyone to jail. The judge's job is to simply learn of the details of the events in question and decide how the law and its recommended punishments apply to any given case. The judge also is not responsible to make the laws. What the law says is none of his business. His business is to simply ask whether or not the conditions of the laws were fulfilled in specific cases, and then, if they are, to apply the prescribed sentences. So, the law of a state works in sort of a pyramid system, with the lawmaker at the top, the judges beneath the lawmaker, and then the enforcement officers on the ground. And that model allows the whole system to operate with the least dependence on individual wisdom. If the other case was allowed, where the lawmakers wrote very generally and left more and more to the judgment of judges or even law enforcement officials, there would be more and more problems in the administration of justice in a state. If we think of every city, every county, every state having their own judges, it's unlikely that we can find wise judges to fill all of these seats. It's unlikely that we're going to find honest and good men who cannot be bribed and who are not willing to pervert justice to fill all of these seats. And therefore making the administration of justice dependent on good individuals on the ground or in the courts is a bad idea. Aristotle explained that the legislators should take as much power away from judges as possible by making the laws as explicit as possible. Now, if we look at modern schools, we'll find that modern schools are organized like this foolish state would be organized. If we were to visit a local school, we would find that there appears to be a pyramid structure. There's a principal, and there are all kinds of office staff members like curriculum developers, guidance counselors, a bunch of administrative positions, and then there's this army of teachers. And yet we would find that if we ask the principal to explain for us the curriculum and what's taught to the students, he doesn't know. That's not his job. He's simply an administrator. In other words, the law, as it were, is provided in the most general terms and left to the inferiors to administer and judge for themselves. If we were to go down to the next level and visit with the administrative staff and ask about what's to be taught to the students, we would find that that's not their job either. And so if we asked who actually decides what is taught to the children and how it's taught, and the answer in almost all modern schools would be the classroom teachers make those decisions. And the way that this worked in classes that I taught in schools that I taught in, was that I, as a teacher, was responsible to submit my lesson plans to the office. Every Monday morning, I had to turn in lesson plans that summarized what I intended to do in my classes for that week. And supposedly, the principal would review those lesson plans, but in reality, those lesson plans, along with those of my colleagues, sat in that inbox and never moved. In all honesty, no one had any clue what specifically was being taught to students day by day. In fact, at one school, they decided that they wanted to get the curriculum in order, so their idea was to have all of the teachers enter all of their lesson plans into a database that would then become the school curriculum. And we can see that this whole idea has everything upside down and backwards. The curriculum is supposed to be decided at the top and to the greatest detail possible, because it's much more likely that we can find one wise principle than that we're going to find 40 wise teachers. And this is the great organizational failure of modern schools. We've built a system of grade level schools for which there is no supply of wise and effective teachers, and the kids just have to deal with it. But we're never going to find teachers to occupy all of these positions, and the schools depend on what I've talked about in other talks, this myth of the great teacher, the super teacher. The reality of the situation is that when we do find a super teacher, that super teacher is really someone who is going to be either an administrator, or should be the administrator, or they're going to be in another field of work within a few years. Education is just a stepping stone. But the super teacher understands more about education and the curriculum than the so-called principal does, because the principal's job is administrative. He's responsible for fundraising, speaking at the ceremonies, and all of these public activities that really have nothing to do with the essential mission of a school. Now, when we talk about the organization of schools or homeschool co-ops, we're able to set up this structure in the right way. In the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, our expertise is in the actual details of the curriculum. And because we're free to pursue ideals in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, we're free to research and restore everything according to its perfect state, without any compromise. We're able to map out a plan that's the ideal plan. We're free to do that. This is what distinguishes the Classical Liberal Arts Academy from any school or homeschool group that develops or is to be developed. We have the freedom to be idealistic. But most people who are organizing schools or co-ops are not going to have that same freedom. They're going to have to deal, if they're going to create a school or a co-op, they're going to have to deal with the people and resources available to them. And that's going to limit what they can do, how they can do it, and when they can do it. Fortunately, we can offer our expertise to those who would organize these schools or groups, and we can help them to take an honest and realistic look at their circumstances and figure out what the best course of action is for them at the present time in their present circumstances. And then we can work to improve the program incrementally, one phase at a time, bringing the community along with us. Because a lot of the work that's going to be needed is going to be articulating the principles and benefits of the classical liberal arts curriculum to the parents of the children and helping them to buy in. And when they buy in, then those schools and groups will have more freedom to pursue ideals with less and less compromise required. But that's a process, and that's why I said at the beginning of this talk, I don't think people realize how difficult this work is, because you don't just install the classical liberal arts, flip the lights on, and start running. That's not how it works. There's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done for a long time before any hope of having a real classical Catholic school can be expected. Just like the work of any business, there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done before anyone starts buying stuff. And wise businessmen will play the long game. They'll be willing to work and sacrifice at the beginning so that the best possible business can be created and succeed in the long term, and God willing, permanently. So what we offer to groups interested in starting schools or co-ops, we offer our expertise for the sake of consultation and help with all of the work that needs to be done, figuring out how to actually get started, how to improve, and how to maintain a quality classical Catholic educational program, how to compromise when compromise needs to be made, but when to know where the compromise needs to stop, where to draw the line in the sand and say, you can't go past this point. We can provide training either online or on site for those who will be working as tutors or assistants, even administrators. We can provide yearly training and development. We can provide all of the curriculum resources and materials. We can provide 24/7 support for those who are doing the work, that they could always contact or call to ask questions or get some advice or help with practical details or even philosophical details. And we can also provide direct support for parents and students who may have questions that simply get beyond what the tutors or assistants at the school are currently prepared to help with. So we take all of the expertise and specialization of classical liberal arts studies off of the shoulders of those who would like to organize and start classical Catholic schools or co-ops. Now, if I was going to start a homeschool co-op and I wanted to start a classical Catholic homeschool co-op, what I would do, and this is how the CLAA is designed to work with someone who would start one of these groups. I would take it for granted that homeschooling families in the area already have some connection with an existing homeschool curriculum program, the more popular ones, the box curriculums, and so on. And we have to understand also that many families choose their curriculum not by any philosophical principles or even details of the curriculum itself, but they make choices about what program to use based on what their friends are using, so that they can participate in groups and all that sort of thing. So don't think you're going to get into the details of philosophical discussions or the history of education and think that any of these people are going to care about that stuff. It's often much, much simpler than that. So they're already going to be engaged in groups or with other homeschool programs. And what I recommend is simply starting by offering courses that enrich those programs. So if we look at Seton, for example, we find that while they really don't do anything well, they cover all the basics of the grade level public school requirements, and most parents have a hard time thinking beyond that. But some parents might be interested in having their children learn a little more, enrich the curriculum with some additional studies. And some good recommendations for that would be courses like Latin vocabulary, Latin reading, for high school students, it might be classical philosophy, an ethics course, a classical physics course, a classical metaphysics course for upper school students, maybe a rhetoric course, study the Summa Theologica, sacred scripture course. So what could be done is to simply offer a selection of enrichment courses to students who are already engaged with other curriculum programs. And hopefully, when the parents see the quality of the study materials and the quality of support provided by the tutor or the assistant who works and offers these courses to the children, they'll begin to ask whether there's anything more that they can do. This is explicitly or exactly what happened to me when I first started the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. I started offering rhetoric, reasoning, Latin, and history classes to local homeschool students. And as soon as we got started, the parents wanted to know if we could do more. And it started to snowball. Of course, this depends on the personality and the skill of the tutors. If they're awkward and clumsy and uncertain of what they're doing, or if the kids just don't like them, they're not going to succeed. But if they're sociable, diligent, well-prepared and organized, and the kids like them, that's when things can really get rolling. Because more than anything, parents want their children to be happy. They want them to like learning. They want them to have good Christian influences in their lives. Parents are willing and interested in anything that can help encourage and motivate their children. So I would start by offering enrichment courses locally, and then I would make it known that more is available. I would continue. Now here's where we have to be a little bit shrewd as far as business. The person organizing this group has to realize that that work of meeting beginners is always going to be the primary focus. That bridge between the modern school curriculum and those enrichment courses. If someone is successful at that work, they're going to need to continue to focus on that work, because without that work, nothing else is possible. This is one of the things that I've struggled with in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. While I'm fluent in Latin and Greek and able to teach philosophy and all of these wonderful, lofty studies, the greatest demand on which the financial support of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy rests is in the most elementary courses in the program. And there's always this struggle, because I'd like to go and fly with the eagles, but for this whole entire thing to work, I have to stay on the ground and work with the beginners. You'd think that having a program where there's a teacher who can teach Latin and Greek and philosophy and scholastic theology and all these lofty subjects, you'd think that everyone was so eager to get into those studies, but that's not the case. Most of the contacts I receive are asking about petty school and English reading and elementary arithmetic. And only rarely does a student emerge from that beginning group of students and make his or her way up into the loftier subjects over the long haul. And I work with those students individually, but the success of the work depends on the willingness and ability to teach those introductory enrichment courses and elementary level courses as effectively as possible. So if your desire is to start a school so that you can stand around like a college professor and gab with students about philosophy and literature, it's not going to work. You're going to have to start with enrichment courses that make the ramp into classical studies as low and smooth as possible. And I recommended a few courses that are good options for that. So that's how the program could start. And the way that you could manage it financially would be to determine what you were going to do, what kind of money you would need to receive to allow you to do that work. And this is just matter-of-fact business talk. You can't be afraid to ask for a living wage. But at the same time, you can't bill the development of your school to your first student's parents. They have to pay what's just for tuition for their children, not for your future students. And so you have to be willing to live very simply to get started, or you have to have another source of income. Our prices are designed to be very low to support this business model. And the way that it would work is like this. If you had a student who wanted to sign up for classes, he could either purchase an individual course from the CLAA, or he could purchase a student subscription plan to access all courses. And that would cost, let's say that costs $25 per month. Now that's very cheap. And that's the point. You then could add the price for your own services to that $25 a month for each student. So let's just talk theoretical. Let's say that you're a young guy or a young woman and you don't need much to get started. Let's say you need to make $3,000 a month. Well, if you take that $3,000 a month and divide it by 4 weeks, it comes out to about $750 per week. And so if you have 20 students, and you take that $750 and divide it by 20 students, you need to make about $37.50 a week from each student. Times 4 would be $150 a month. $150 a month times 20 students gives you your $3,000 a month. In addition to that, you'd simply have to add the cost of the CLA courses. So you'd have 20 students paying $25 per month. That would add $500 a month. So if you build all of your students combined a total of $3,500 a month, you would receive your $3,000 a month to work, and you would have the money to pay for their access to the CLA curriculum materials. And it would be that simple. You could choose to build them yourself, which would be more likely your preference. Make it look a little more professional for the school or program. And then you would simply pay us what's owed to us out of the money you collect, or you could arrange these things in a number of different ways. That's really not important. But the business model is very simple. Making it affordable is of the utmost importance, because when you're getting started and you claim, this is the moral dilemma in education, you claim that the education that you're promoting is for the spiritual good and necessity of the children. You can't give any appearance that you're in this for money, because that'll blow the whole ethos of the program. And if you are in it for money, you can't lie to people and say that you're in it for something else, and then every time you lift a finger, you're sending out invoices to people. That's just not how it works. If you're going to bill someone every time you lift a finger, you need to forget about this plan to start a classical school or co-op program. You need to go into this work as a personal mission. You need to be generous. You need to give everything. And in all honesty, you need to give first and figure out payment later. You need to give as much as you can for free to prove your sincerity. And prove to the parents that you're only asking for what is necessary for your life. Because no family is interested in making you wealthy. You're taking money out of their own bank account. You're taking money away from their vacation. You're taking money away from their clothes budget, from their transportation budget, from their utilities budget. Not everyone is abundant in resources and just dishing out excess money. A lot of families are going to need to sacrifice things to afford to homeschool their children or send them to study with you. And you need to respect those sacrifices and prove that you're sacrificing too, because you really believe that this is necessary. And if you're not willing to put your own blood on the table, as it were, you're simply not going to be trusted. Because there are a million other options for parents. And if this really isn't about some kind of necessary Christian learning, but it's really just a business undertaking by Mr. Smith here, it's not going to work. It may work short term, but it's not going to last. And you're going to lay in bed at night with a conscience that just isn't clear and free. And if you want to have that moral happiness and freedom, you have to pay the price for it. You have to work and give. Like Jesus says, give and seek nothing in return. And don't worry about money, because when you prove yourself trustworthy, when you prove yourself rare, and what you offer is valuable, and the families perceive that what you offer their family is valuable, they're going to want to secure your help. And they're going to be willing to pay for it. But you have to prove that first. And the prices that we offer our curriculum materials at make it possible for you to do that. You simply take our costs and add to them the cost that you hope to earn for your work, which is just as long as it's diligent work. And you can get that program off the ground like that. So financially, things are pretty simple. As far as the structure of the program, it's going to depend on how many students are interested. If you've got a small number of students, and those students are of varying ages, the best thing to do might be to start not by trying to organize a group, but by simply tutoring and visiting people's houses as you continue to work to build the number of participating families and get to a point where group activities are possible. You'll find that the parents are often eager to help organize group activities because they'd like to get their kids out of the house with other kids doing things. But it may take that initial work of meeting the students and parents where they are until your numbers of participants gets up to a significant number where group activities are even possible. If you're starting a school and you have parents that are interested in a school program, but there's a small number of students and they're of varying ages, you're going to need to learn how to set up a one-room schoolhouse type model, which is perfectly reasonable and effective, but you have to learn how to manage that environment. Fortunately, our study materials work in that environment and allow that school body to grow. But if you have interest in a school program, you're going to need to learn to operate a one-room schoolhouse type organization. If the interest is in a hybrid homeschool co-op type thing, you may want to start by visiting families where they are, and then as groups develop, organizing group activities. So for example, let's say you have 6 students who are interested in studying Latin vocabulary, but they're all different ages. There's almost no point in organizing a group activity for that group of students. But when you get to the point where you have 30 students interested in Latin vocabulary, and 18 of them are ages 13 and up, and the rest are between ages 8 and 12, you can set up 2 different groups and actually give them activities to do that are appropriate. So you may just need to be patient and continue working until you have real groups that can then be organized for group activities. Once you start getting greater and greater numbers of students and interested participants, there are going to be other challenges, like if you're in mid-November and there's more kids who want to come, you can't structure the group activity so only those who started from the beginning can participate, because you won't allow new students to get involved. So you have to think about what the group activities consist of so that new students can always come and just jump right in. A perfect example of this is Latin vocabulary, because every lesson is just simply a different topic. And it doesn't matter whether a student starts at lesson 1 or lesson 25. It'd be the perfect type of study as one gets started, where students can just come right in. And again, if you get so many students that you have the luxury to start making rules, because beggars can't be choosers, well then you can start saying, enrollment is due by August 15th, our meeting starts September 1st, and you can be more strict about it. But you can't do that in the beginning. You have to be flexible and allow the groups to develop. And thankfully, we can help you with that, but a box curriculum won't allow that. So as far as structure and organization, it's going to depend on the numbers of children who have interest in your classes and activities, their ages, all the details of the makeup of that group. And then you're going to need you're going to want to say yes to everyone so that you can build this group. You're going to need to say yes to everyone. And you're going to have to figure out how to make that group productive and allow it to grow. And there aren't many different programs that are going to allow you to do that except ours. Now, one way that, if you ask, well, how do I grow a group like this? How do I organize and grow this kind of thing? Normally, when you wish to offer something to, let's say, the homeschool community, the homeschool community is already doing stuff. They already have all kinds of different groups and activities and things like that. And so what I would recommend is you simply advertise the classes you're offering or the activities you're offering. You advertise it in a place where homeschool families can see it. For example, in your town, there might be a homeschool supply store where homeschool families go to buy or trade homeschool supplies. And they'll likely have a bulletin board or a website or a Facebook page or some place where they allow people to post announcements. Or you can simply ask if you can share a flyer or something like that. And you can make an initial contact with one of the local homeschool families or several of the homeschool families. And then you've got your foot in the door. And if you start meeting with that family and things go well, word of mouth will begin to get around. And if you continue making those announcements or advertisements available, people will start to recommend the name, start to hear the name around in the mouths of other homeschool mothers, and interest will pick up. Another thing you can do if you're fortunate enough to connect with an influential member of the homeschool community, is that you can organize an informational meeting. When I was first starting the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, one of my first families was an extremely active woman in the local homeschool community, and she organized informational events for me. She arranged one at a local Catholic bookstore one evening, so it was kind of like a coffee hangout, meet and greet at the local bookstore. And we packed, that bookstore was packed with people. And then she also organized a dinner at her house and invited local homeschool families. And we had, I think, 50 families showed up to that first informational meeting, including the president of a local Catholic college. And so something like that, some providential connection like that can radically help get things going. Or you can do this kind of thing. If you're already involved in the parish or in the homeschool community, you can simply host and invite people to an informational meeting. You should obviously build a website for your school or program, and if you need help with that, I can give you some advice there. You're going to need to learn some basics of marketing, not in this sense of trying to sell stuff to people, but in terms of trying to promote your program and the work that you do within your audience. You're not going to be living in North Carolina and advertising in Nevada, obviously, so it's not global marketing, it's local marketing. You're going to want to have a website, social media pages, phone number, email for people to contact. You're going to want to have important information available, primarily on a website, but also possibly something in a Google Doc or PDF that you can attach to an email or forward to someone. You're going to need to get word around and try to get your group rolling. And for Christians, really, this is often pretty easy. And you should take it as a warning that if you don't have any connections, you have no place to start, you're probably not the kind of person to do this work. And so that's something to think about. You might need to work on social skills and networking before you imagine yourself to be the organizer and leader of some school or co-op program if you don't already have the contacts, connections, and resources to get it going. But it's not hard to get started, especially if it's necessary and you seem like a promising tutor or someone who can actually do this. Homeschool families are always in need of help. And if you can provide that help, you're going to find families are interested. They need help. And when you decide you want to pursue this, what I recommend is you get in touch with me and we start chatting. We start having some Zoom conference calls and we start talking through the details, and I can help you. I can provide you with some experienced consultation because I have done this work before. I've even started my own private school before. And I'm also the one with the most mastery of the curriculum. And I'm happy to offer those resources to you at no cost to help you work through these initial plans and get things going. And I'm willing to do that because it's a partnership in the sense that if your program is successful and you're purchasing curriculum materials from us, well, then I'm interested in helping your program succeed. It's a golden rule business, as I call it. Everyone involved benefits. That's true business. The parents benefit by getting some valuable help. You benefit by getting some expert consultation and advice. And I benefit by getting enrollment in our online courses. We all benefit. That's golden rule business. And so I'm willing to help you in every way that I can to make all that work. And if you need help, extra help in the beginning because there's financial challenges and things like that, we can just work around all those details until things get rolling. So if this is of interest to you and you have reason to believe that it's not some silly dream, especially if you're the kind of person who's like unemployed, doesn't know what to do, doesn't have a good education, and sees this as like a possible business opportunity, just forget it. Forget it. No one is interested in paying your bills. Your interest in this should begin as a Christian mission. You should be competent to do this work. You should have realistic promise of success in pursuing this work and should simply need some help. If you have no clue where to even start, I'm not talking to people like that. There are always people looking for a way to make money, and they'd love to pretend they're a teacher. They'd love to be the leader of something. That's not what I'm talking about. But if you have a realistic opportunity to organize a classical Catholic school or begin a simple homeschool co-op program or even provide private tutoring to students in the area and offering these enrichment courses, and you'd like to have advice and get some direction for how to do these things. And then you're going to actually start doing them. We're not just going to gab about it idly for 5 years. I'm willing to put my expertise and experience on the table to help you. We can talk about what courses you could offer. I could help you organize things like your website, business plan for what you're going to be doing. All of that practical stuff, I have experience with all of that and can help you there. And then we can get into, once we start seeing what interest looks like in the programs you want to offer, we can see what the actual interest looks like. I can provide you with information to communicate with parents. If this turns out to be something that looks promising, I could even come and speak to those parents on your behalf. I could publish videos for you to share with those parents. I'll do everything in my power to help you succeed because, again, it also trickles back to me and the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, which is what I'm interested in. So that's where I'd begin with these thoughts and discussions. I'd like to present this as the first part of this conversation. I intend to publish more detailed talks on the topic in the future, but if you're interested in getting started with something like this, I recommend that you get in touch with me. It's all going to depend on what kind of interest you have, what sort of numbers of students you have, what those parents are interested in doing, what those parents are able to afford to do, what you are capable of doing. Remember, you don't have to be a classical schoolmaster. That's not what would be needed. You could lean on us for the academic expertise. What you would need to be is a devout Christian, a good example, a hard worker. You'd have to be personable. You'd have to be fairly articulate and organized. You'd have to be trustworthy and sincere. If you can offer those qualities, then you have a good chance of succeeding. But you don't have to pretend you're an expert. You don't have to pretend you're something you're not, which is going to cause you to lose trust in the end. You can be honest. And if you remain in your lane, as they say, you'll have the most likelihood of success because you won't overextend yourself, you won't embarrass yourself, you won't lose trust, and things like that. When parents ask you questions, instead of just babbling nonsense, you'll tell them that you'll get them the answers, and then when you do respond to them, you actually deliver them answers that are helpful. You give them value. So long as you're able to do that, you'll be appreciated, and the parents will be willing to support you because you offer them something of value. So, if you have any questions about these things, if you think you have an opportunity to organize something like this, or there's a group of you and some friends, or some other families, or even relatives are interested in organizing something like this, and you think that there's a desire for it and a need for it, and that you can make it work, then I recommend that you get in touch, and we'll help you to get started organizing. If you have any questions, please contact me. Know that I'm always available to help. We can always schedule a Zoom chat or a simple text live chat or a phone call. Or you can just email me a big laundry list of questions and I'll get answers for you. I wish you well in these things. We need laymen to step up and develop these programs and services. We can't just sit back and ask the clergy to do it for us. That's really not their job. We have to learn how to take these things into our own hands and offer this work of ours as a service to the church. And if you'd like to get started with that, let's do it. Get in touch, and we'll get to work. I hope that's helpful. God bless.